In Marseille, a prominent anti-drug activist has lost a second brother to suspected criminal gangs. France's second largest city has been struggling to battle drug crime, with more than a dozen people killed since the start of the year. Charlotte Hughes has more.
It's an attack that has sent shockwaves through Marseille. It was around 2:30 p.m. when two people on a motorcycle shot and killed a 20-year-old man. The victim was parking his car in front of this pharmacy in the centre of the city. The school student who witnessed the scene on Thursday was left shaken.
I was coming home from school and I saw a lot of police officers and a sheet on the ground. I found it shocking. I didn't understand. Why him? Why here? Because it's quiet here. I keep thinking that at any moment someone could shoot me just because I live here.
The method of the attack recalls gang killings, yet the young victim had no criminal record. His name was Mehdi Kassassi. His older brother, Amin Kassassi, is publicly committed to fighting drug trafficking in Marseille, which is renowned for worsening drug wars. The prosecutor fears the murder could be a warning aimed at Amin.
This 20-year-old man has no direct or indirect connection to narco-trafficking, except through his brother Amin, who is indeed very involved in the fight.
To get someone who's committed to fighting drug trafficking, would that cross a line?
If that were the case, we could clearly say that would be at a tipping point.
A Green Party member, Amin had already lost an older brother who was murdered in connection with drug trafficking in 2020. Amin then founded an NGO to help victims of drug violence. His community is in shock.
I know the fight of Amin on behalf of the victims' families, so this makes us all the more sad. Their mom is going to bury 2 children in 4 years. It's unimaginable.
Amin had been under police protection, including after writing a book about victims of drug trafficking in Marseille. A burned-out motorcycle was found in the city. The 2 perpetrators are still at large and are actively being sought.
Well, for more, we can speak to Joseph Downing, a senior lecturer in politics and international relations at Aston University. Thank you for joining us here on Paris Direct. If this killing was indeed a warning, Marseille's prosecutor and mayor both said something to the effect that this was unprecedented. The city infamous in France for its violent turf wars. But do you believe this is opening up a new front of violence against those who speak out against that drug trafficking?
Well, firstly, we have to be a little bit cautious here, right? Because we haven't established really the facts of the event thus far. I mean, this could be a mistaken identity. There could be, that could be an alternative explanation. So we have to be slightly cautious. However, if this is something that has been done to intimidate Amin, the victim's brother, who's a prominent anti-gang campaigner, yeah, this would be a massive escalation of violence, right? But it follows a pattern of organized crime groups and specifically drug trafficking groups across the world, but also across Europe. Holland, Belgium are both fighting significant narco trafficking activity, which has resulted in the intimidation of judges, the murder of people locally. So this is a much kind of broader European-wide problem. I mean, it's easy to see in Marseille, right? Marseille has that reputation, but this is something that is indeed much broader. However, when I've been in Marseille and I've interviewed other anti-gang activists, they have been subject to campaigns of intimidation. So one that I interviewed said that they had a bullet put in their letterbox at one point, right? However, I mean, so the ante has been upping slowly over recent years, but obviously killing somebody's brother would be a significant escalation.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring in that bigger picture of what's happening elsewhere in Europe. But for right now, can we just focus on Marseille? And I want you to paint a picture for our viewers who might not be familiar with this city. Is the violence that's going on in Marseille so rampant that people who might not have any involvement with these drug gangs are seeing it, or do people say, oh, it's confined to certain areas, and if you're not doing illegal activity, you won't be affected?
Generally speaking, it is confined to the poorer northern suburbs of Marseille, where there are kind of high-rise government housing estates, which are effectively actually controlled by these drug gangs, right? I mean, that's one of the really interesting things about Marseille and the way that the government has been really ineffective in tackling any of these problems. When you approach these estates, they are barricaded and they have representatives of the drug cartels that can dictate whether you enter the estate or not. They will ask you, why are you there? Who are you coming to visit? Are you coming to buy something or not? So this is a really serious problem. However, generally speaking, there is collateral damage, right? There are people that are harmed as a result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it generally is something that is confined to those that are involved, and not just involved, but those who are involved who have somehow crossed a line with these kinds of groups. The thing about Marseille that's really interesting is the crime in Marseille is extremely organized, extremely ordered, extremely well resourced, and very transnational. And generally speaking, I mean, when you put this in a larger context, organized criminal groups generally don't like violence because it brings attention on their other activities. They're about business, they're about making money, and to them, violence really is a last resort. And so this is why this is such a shocking event. I mean, if this is something that does indeed come to be a killing that is about intimidating activists, I mean, this really is a step of escalation.
Yeah, and when you talk about this transnational organization, how does France or any other European government deal with combating against that? What resources are needed?
Well, this is really, really, really difficult. I mean, I've interviewed individuals in law enforcement and prosecution in Marseille, and they're very candid. They will tell you our budgets are small. We are poorly resourced. We are fighting essentially an enemy in these drug gangs whose tentacles wrap around opaque financial jurisdictions like the United Arab Emirates, like Dubai, where they suspect or they have evidence that a lot of the money made in the drug markets of Marseille is laundered through Dubai. It's sent through Spain. Many of these groups have connections. I mean, you know, crime doesn't have an ethnicity, right? But many of these groups have connections to North Africa and began their journey in the drugs trade, smuggling hashish from Morocco to Spain. So, you know, this is something that involves a range of jurisdictions and a range of jurisdictions who really don't want to tackle it. Right? The Moroccan government doesn't really want to tackle hashish smuggling because it supports an entire region of the country effectively in the Rift Valley. The UAE does not want to tackle financial crime or money laundering because that's how they make a lot of money. And that is really one of the untold unique selling points actually of people relocating to Dubai is there's very few checks on the money or the resources that you bring in. And so thus it's really, really difficult for local prosecutors to deal with any of these problems because they're dealing with jurisdictions who really are just not interested. But the other problem here is the broader picture of France, which is under significant budgetary strain. And we've seen all of the arguments recently about Emmanuel Macron and the difficulty he had passing a budget. And many in law enforcement just feel that they're not a priority when it comes to the allocation of scarce resources. Another problem here being the extremely poor socioeconomic conditions of many of these suburbs across French cities, including in Marseille, that the government has repeatedly failed to regenerate in any way. It's seen again as something that is very low down the list of priorities when it comes to the allocation of scarce resources. So there needs to be a law enforcement aspect to this, where the law enforcement authorities are better resourced, but there also needs to be a much broader social approach that makes getting involved with this kind of activity less attractive to young people. If you go to these areas of Marseille, the choice kind of exists between doing extremely precarious, very low paid, if not kind of completely on the black economy, undeclared cash in hand work, or making a lot of money and gaining a high status by working for one of these very organized drug gangs. And that social context also needs significant government intervention if there's any hope of tackling these key issues.
Yeah, and that social context, without any nuance, can easily fuel culture wars. So I'm wondering, how are France's various political parties spinning stories like the fight against drugs in Marseille or elsewhere? How are they politicizing it?
I mean, thus far, they've been very cautious, in fact, to politicize this as a particular issue. I think, especially given the family dynamics currently, this issue hasn't received that much attention. But in the area that we live in, where social media dominates so much the political landscape, I'm not saying it's not important what politicians say, but it's perhaps also an important context to consider the way that shadowy groups on social media will be spinning this much larger issue. And I've picked up, in my social media research, a lot of shadowy far-right accounts and far-right groups do spin this as something that's about, North Africans and specifically Muslims, corrupting the social fabric of France without referencing the fact that, especially in Marseille, for the best part of sort of 18, 90, if not 100 years, has been dominated by organised crime, and organised crime that is homegrown, right, from the island of Corsica, from, Italian migrants that came, before and after the Second World War. So this is something that clearly, as I think you're hinting at, isn't a racial issue, but can so easily be politicized and spun completely out of context, right? As we know, crime doesn't have an ethnicity, and if you look at the map of drug gangs currently active in Marseille, it's kind of like a patchwork that represents the multicultural nature of Marseille as a city. There are Roma gypsy gangs, there are gangs that come from the Comore Islands. There are, there's an entire spread of people that are involved in various forms of organised crime in Marseille, and that's something that's really important, I think, also to mention.
Joseph, thank you so much for your time. Joseph Downing from Aston University. Thank you.